Often people ask questions about greenhouse gas emissions and reservoirs. And it was a recent issue, maybe 20 years ago. And as you know, the reservoirs in the north are more than 30 years old. So we don't have any measurements related to greenhouse gases before the creation of reservoir. But it was interesting for us to know what was going on. And we have to know that greenhouse gas emissions from natural water bodies occurs naturally. A natural lake, a natural river, a natural estuary, a natural peat box emits greenhouse gases. It's a natural process. So it's not only man-made. When we read newspaper about greenhouse gases and cars and trucks and industries, we think it's only man-made, but Mother Nature is emitting naturally greenhouse gases. Forest fire. In northern Canada, we have a lot of natural forest fire in the summer, and forest fire emits, or if you use wood to heat your house, you will emit greenhouse gases. So it's a natural process burning carbon. And what's going on? We have started to develop instrumentation to measure emissions from our existing reservoir. Results was very few, but it was an existing reservoir. The question that is raised often, what are the effects of the reservoir? Is there more or less than natural lakes around it? Because the measured about existing reservoirs, which are maybe 10, 20 years old, a lake and a reservoir in northern Quebec, which is 20 years old or 10 years old, emits the same range of greenhouse gases. So it's a natural process. Where greenhouse gases are coming, it's the decomposition of the vegetation. But we have to understand that in the Nordic condition in Canada, it's very different than the Amazonian forest or the Congo River in Africa, where it is very warm, a lot of vegetation. So the fuel for greenhouse gases, it is the carbon, the vegetation available that will be decomposed. And in northern Quebec, because it's very cold, because the trees are very small, and the trees will not be decomposed. It's very thick, water is too cold. The decomposition of the organic matter, it's lichen, moss, topsoil, needle, and leaves. You flood the land, the decomposition of this organic matter goes to the surface. So for the first year, I would say maximum 5 years after the creation of the reservoir, you have some greenhouse gases emissions. And about 5 years after the creation of the reservoir in northern Canada, you are in the same range than in natural water bodies. So very, very low emissions from the reservoir. And among these very low emissions of greenhouse gases, it's about 98% CO2 and about only 1% methane, CH4. The third year after the creation of a reservoir, methane's emissions from the reservoir are exactly the same than natural water bodies surrounding the reservoir. We made a world premiere some years ago. A reservoir called Eastmain 1 was created, and we were able to measure with many professors and students from different universities in Quebec what are the emissions from natural environments, lakes, river, ponds, forests, burned forest, mature forest, before the reservoir and after. Now it's 5 years after. It's why we can say that 5 years after the creation of the reservoir, the emissions are in the same range than natural water bodies around. Very low in Nordic conditions. Never forget, we have 4 feet of ice above the surface. It's very, very different in Amazonian forest or tropical forest where it is very warm. There's a lot of vegetation. There are reservoirs in tropical conditions that emits a lot of greenhouse gases, but not in northern Canada.